Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present to you about the Kubernetes Ingress Controller, specifically the supported Ingress Controller, which is based off of Nginx, which is the only Kubernetes supported Ingress Controller right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the security features. So first, I was going to introduce myself, but I've already been introduced. So I don't need to do that anymore. So you can find my Twitter if you want to take pictures and tweet out the session and and what you enjoy, and if you have any questions later on, you can have my contact information there, and then I can help out. So right now I'm working as a technical marketing manager, so I'm promoting all of GitLab's tools, especially those focused and centered around security. And Ingress is one of the components that I've specialized in, so I'm going to take the initiative and kind of showcase that. Oh, and also the hat. Funny story, the brand Neff. I like that brand because one time someone asked me, what brand is that? So I just said pointed Neff, and they told me makes sense. So I do like things that make sense. Little fun fact. There's a QR code and a link to a GitLab repository that has like little tidbits and YAML files that you can deploy on your own Kubernetes cluster. So I have links there to making a Google Cloud Kubernetes engine cluster and YAML, so that way you can actually deploy this yourself later on. So I also added the slide deck to the presentation. So if you go to LastCon, and so you don't have to like rush and take pictures, but they're on the slide deck's posted as well. So what am I going to go over? So show of hands, how many of you have worked with Kubernetes before? And how many of you have worked with Ingress and deployed an Ingress controller? Okay, so quite a few. So I'm going to go over just kind of like the basics as a little refresher, and then I'm going to talk about different authentication schemes that can be applied, the web application firewall, which is mod security within the Ingress controller, and then just different ways of actually securing the Ingress controller and different rules that you might want to apply to your application. And then I'll go over to some basics that you might want to also secure on the app side before actually even deploying. And troubleshooting as well. So how to troubleshoot an issue within the Ingress controller. So what is Ingress? Pretty much an Ingress means going in, like an entrance to something. So think of the Ingress controller as the front door. So the front door to your applications. So within that, it's essentially a bunch of networking rules that are going to lead you towards your application. So the whole flow, the whole Ingress flow. There's a composition of several objects, which are the deployment, the Ingress resource, and the services, and all that's controlled by an Ingress controller. So just to kind of give a quick, nice, clean, very basic diagram on what's going on. The traffic comes in, hits the load balancer, and then the load balancer, what it does is from the outside world, it routes it to your Ingress controller. So it does that by exposing a load balancer service. So a load balancer service just pretty much says, hey, everything coming in through the load balancer, let's send it to the Ingress controller. So essentially, once everything reaches the Ingress controller has a set of rules that are applied via the Ingress resources. So this right here would be the Ingress resource. And the Ingress resource says, like, hey, if I have the path like /cat or /dog, let's point that towards a service. And the service, what that does is it exposes the application. So a service is essentially, there's like a cluster IP, and so these will be exposed within the cluster to themselves, and the service will point towards the different applications. So I mean, if I was a little quick, if I was losing anyone, if anyone has any questions at this point, yeah.
So the Ingress controller is a layer 7 router as far as networking goes?
Essentially, it could be layer 7, layer 3, 4 as well. Yeah. So those are the basics. And so the Ingress controller monitors the ingress path in Kubernetes. So anytime you do a kubectl apply ingress, any ingress, what it does is, and I'll give some demos. I'll probably start demos after this slide. But as soon as you apply an ingress resource, what it does is it builds an Nginx configuration, which adds that rule. So if I do meow/meow, it'll create the rule like /meow, and then everything that goes along with that rule. So, yeah. Okay, so one thing to do is to deploy the Ingress controller. What a lot of people do is they deploy it via Helm. So at GitLab, once you have a cluster set up, you can just quickly install Helm and Tiller, and then with a click, you can install your Ingress controller, and then you'll be assigned an endpoint. So usually, that's the whole flow of things. What you would do is you would have your Kubernetes cluster, and then you just deploy your Ingress controller. And it's just a deployment that runs on, you can set it up for 2 of them to run or 1 to run. So just make a pod with the Ingress controller on it that listens on the Ingress path. And yeah, there's many ways to deploy it. I think the most common one is via Helm. And so I deployed mine using Auto DevOps in GitLab. So it's just essentially you build a project, and what it does is it'll go ahead and build the whole pipeline for you based off the files that are there. So the build job will go ahead and build the actual Docker image, and then once it'll test everything, and then once it hits production, it'll actually deploy the service, the Ingress resource, and the actual application deployment. So I did that pretty easily. And then there's two ways that you can configure, Ingress rules. One of them is via annotations, and one of them is via configuration maps. So the configuration map applies globally, and the annotations apply just per rule. So those are 2 ways. So if you just want to apply something on /meow on that route, like www.lastcon.com/meow, it'll apply all those rules on just that route based off of the annotation. But if it were a configuration map, it'll apply to all the routes within a host. And let me show you an example. So if I go over to my terminal, which I hope you can see that. I don't know if I can make it much bigger. Yeah, it's as large as I can make it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my meow deployment. So that's going to make a set of pods. So if I do kubectl get pods, so you can see that there's 2 meow applications. Then I'm going to expose them via service. So you can see that it obtained the cluster IP. So within the cluster, if I send a request to this IP, I'll be able to access my meow application. And then what I'm going to do is I will apply my Ingress resource. So you can see kubectl get Ingress. And what I will do is I'll show you what it looks like. So it's just saying on the host meow.com, we're going to hit the service meow service. The meow service hits the actual application within the meow pods on port 80. So essentially now if I send a curl, so let me print my environment. I don't remember where to save that. So this is my load balancer IP. So essentially if I sent a curl, and I'm going to pass the host header. That way, since meow.com is an actual site and I just want to use the site on my cluster, and I want to do some virtual routing, I'll just send it here, so meow.com. And then I will do my load balancer IP. And then you should see that there is essentially the application. So the application just prints out the request and some information on the request. So that's how routing works. If I were to just curl the load balancer IP, since there's no actual route set up for just the load balancer IP, it'll just give me a 404. So you can see there. So yeah, that's one. It's the basics. So now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to configure that same Meow application with basic authentication. So basic authentication is pretty much just authenticating using a username and password via HTTP. So let's go back. Okay. So I am going to apply, okay, basic authentication.yaml. So let's show you what that looks like. So what I did here is I added annotations. So this will only apply to the /meow path. So I added annotations that will tell me what the auth type is, what the auth secret is, and what the auth realm is. So essentially, there's going to be a secret that contains the base64 encoded username and password, and it'll use that secret to go ahead and authenticate against. So let me see, do I have those secrets in there? Okay, I don't have that secret there, so I'm going to go ahead and create it. So let's make, okay. So now I should have a file named auth, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the secret. Okay, so there should be a secret called basic auth created. Well, it got quiet when the AC turned on. Okay, so now if I perform a curl, I should get, oh, I shouldn't get that though. I think since the secret didn't exist before, it's probably that I need to recreate the Ingress resource. Okay, so that's what I should get. 401 unauthorized. Authentication required. So now, what I can do is I can pass in the username and the password that I created. I can't remember what it was. Oh, yeah. So now once I send that, yeah, I should be authenticated. If I were to send in the wrong password, I'll still get the 401. So it uses the Kubernetes secret to load the username and password. So that's one way of securing it. It's not the recommended way, but like the most recommended way. But at least if you want to have some type of basic auth implemented, that's one easy way of doing it. There's also external authentication. So external authentication allows you to use an outside source. So it can be used for basic auth that lives somewhere else. It could be used for OAuth, which the OAuth way, it can be used with any OAuth provider that does the OAuth flow, essentially. So there's lots of ways on configuring that, and I'll write a blog on that soon, since it's not super trivial. There's a lot of things that need to go in, and that's one enhancement that needs to be made into the Ingress documentation. But I can show you. So I will show you the external authentication. So now you can see that what I did is I just added an auth URL, and I just went to, I just added basic auth from HTTP bin, and all that's, it just expects a certain username and password, and then it'll authenticate you that way. So now if I send to curl, I'm going to get 401 unauthorized. But if I do, so this should still fail. OK, so it'll be the one that is expected by the HTTP bin, which I think it was. Yeah. So this is just what the API expects. And then there, I have access to my application. So it's just using an external source. And if anyone's interested after, I'll post more information on how to set up this authentication flow of OAuth, and let you know through an email list once I write up a blog on that, since it's not super trivial. Okay, another fun one is mutual authentication. So who here has worked with mutual authentication before? So client certificate authentication, it basically means that the client certificate and that the client and the server both have to be signed by the same CA, so that way they can verify and trust each other. So you can also implement that within Ingress-Nginx. So that way you would need to pass in a valid client certificate to be able to authenticate with a certain application, a certain path.
So are they authenticating with each other, or are they authenticating against a third service that's holding the private key?
So they're authenticating essentially against a third service because it's a certificate authority. So a certificate authority signs the server certificate and also signs the client certificate. So then the client and the server communicate with each other, but they validate their authenticity based off of their own certificates via the CA.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have another diagram that kind of shows it here. So if you see here. So you can see that it'll request the resource, and it'll present the server certificate. It'll validate the server certificate against the CA. It'll validate the client certificate against the CA, and then if that's valid, then it'll go ahead and authorize you. So one thing a lot of people don't know is about the common names. So it kind of takes some wrapping around and playing with certificates a lot. So common names for the server certificate have to match with the actual host name. And then the certificate authority is usually the name of the certificate authority. That's saved in your keychain, in the browser, in the operating system. And there's a lot of different valid CAs that are trusted. Essentially, in my example, I'm going to use a self-signed CA. So it's not essentially trusted. It's one that I just auto-generated. And then the client certificate is usually the name of the user or the client. So let me go back to demo mode. So let me just. Okay, so I'm going to kubectl. Okay. So in this, you can see I'm using annotations as well. And okay, you can see that I'm pointing towards a secret, and the secret contains my certificates. And I'm telling to verify the client. So I'm telling it to make sure that you're getting a valid client certificate. So let me show you what the secret looks like. So essentially, it is base 64 encoded CA certificate and base 64 encoded server certificate. So that's what you're seeing there. So these are just the certificates that I generated. And I'll show you what they look like. What folder is it in? So essentially, it's just a certificate. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to. It's easier to copy and paste the command. Sorry if I'm moving back and forth a lot. So what I'm going to do is. to my Etsy hosts. Let's make it, okay. So I added meow.com to my Etsy hosts just to make it simpler. So if I curl meow.com, sorry, it's actually going to meow.com. I have to do it HTTPS. So here's one, I guess one good thing I can show. So if I show you my Ingress resource, if you have TLS enabled, that means that meow.com host will be via TLS. So it'll be, if I'm going through HTTPS, it'll route me towards my rule. But if not, it's going to route me towards just the real meow.com, since I only have it enabled via HTTPS. So
the stanza above said it would go to port 80 on your machine.
well, from HTTP, so it'll have to be through SSL. So HTTPS will go to port 80. Yeah. So see, like if I curl meow.com, it wants to send me to like meow.com. But if I curl HTTPS, right, it's going to tell me, it's going to curl to my cluster. So that's why it'll say 400 no required SSL certificate was sent, because I have the mutual authentication enabled. So then what I would have to do in this case is --cert, I believe it was. Let me see. Yeah. So now I'm passing my client certificate and key. And there you go. I should be able to authenticate. So, and in the project, in the repository, there'll be some information on generating the keys. So I have a script there that you can just generate the keys and play with it yourself. Okay, what's next? Okay, so web application firewall. So again, just a sample of the audience who's used the web application firewall. And out of those, who's used mod security specifically? Okay. So essentially, it's just mod security that deploys into the Ingress controller. So by default, the Ingress controller already loads the mod security module. And what it does is it kind of logs and views all your HTTP traffic coming in, and it'll log it. You can add rules to block the traffic. You can limit traffic from certain places. You can just view kind of everything that's going on in the system. You can add rules to detect scanners, to detect any hackers trying to expose a vulnerability, like a SQL injection or anything like that. And you can choose what type of modes you want. So you can choose if you actually want to block certain things, if you want to just log certain things, and have an in-depth analysis on what's going on into your application specifically. So yeah, and it's used in the Ingress-Nginx controller by default. So another part of it is there's the OWASP core rule set. So there are rules that are already provided by OWASP that provide against the OWASP top 10 security vulnerabilities and a lot more different vulnerabilities and attacks that you'd find out there. So I added a whole bunch of lists. I'm not gonna talk about them all, but essentially these are some of the things that you get off the bat with the OWASP core rule set. And there's different paranoia levels that you can set that add a lot more rules and a lot more, they either make them blocking or they log more. So it just depends what you want. And then added a picture of the wasps and OWASP. It has a wasp, but I'm kind of like worried about those animals because every time I go outside my backyard, they just come and bite me in the neck. So I just wanted to, say I get bitten by those things. Yeah, pretty much. So in GitLab, we do provide that as well. We do provide the WAF out of the box configured, and then this is kind of a little roadmap as to what's happening. I think one big problem with the WAF is that it just dumps a bunch of logs to a file in Ingress right now, and there's some challenges around visualizing that data and actually making the logs useful and really examining them. There's different tools out there, but in Ingress-Nginx right now, it's not really easy to deploy. So that's one thing that I'm working on to try to make that information easy to visualize and to show statistics on it and different things like that. So, and with that said, I will give a quick little demo on mod security. So essentially every application that I already have mod security running within my cluster. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to send a request with a user agent of a potential scanner. So there's a scanner called Absinthe. I'm not sure if it's still really relevant these days, but what it does is it tries to send SQL injection attacks into your system, and it uses the user agent Absinthe. So there's a bunch of different user agents that'll be applied. Like if a Nessus scan is run, it'll use a specific user agent. A bunch of different vulnerability, scanning tools. So essentially, what this test will do with mod security is it'll pick up the user agent and it'll log it. So let me just apply the standard cat file, the standard meow ingress. So application ingress. Okay. So now let's send the request. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and examine the logs. So here's what I was saying, that the logs are not really easy to see. They're in an audit log. So you would have to add, something like Kibana or something, or some type of log DNA or log aggregator to that file, and then view it from there and have some way of reporting on that. That would be the essential practice. You don't really get that out of the box, but those are things that you would need to add. So that way you can alert on a certain vulnerability that's found, or on something that mod security picks up would be the best practice around that. So now I'm going into the Ingress controller, and I'm going to view that file to see what's on there. So now, if I view the file and I just tailed it, you can see that it'll say found user agent associated with a security scanner, and the user agent was Absinthe, and it gives us a severity level. So, and all these things can be fine-tuned. A lot of people add custom configurations for things that they find, so they add different severity levels. And these are things you can use to actually alert and things that you can monitor on. And depending on how critical or what the severity level is, you can have PagerDuty, send an email, different things like that. So these things are highly configurable and highly tunable. This is just like a simple example that I was able to come up with. And you can fine tune a lot of different things. So another thing that can be implemented is rate limiting. So the Ingress controller does support different rate limiting configurations per application. So you can limit connections, the rate per second, rate per minute. You can have a whitelist if it's like one of your own internal services accessing it. So this was just kind of like a little basic, this is another way of securing different things, and you can just do it per application or per route. And then there's a lot of different things that should be tuned within the Ingress controller. So it's not solely about Nginx directives. Like the things that we've spoken about. There's a lot of different things like the bucket size, redirecting to HTTPS, cores, implementing cores. There's so many different things that you can configure. Pretty much essentially anything that you can configure with Nginx, you can configure within the Ingress controller, since it runs Nginx as its backend. So there's different configurations that should just be applied by default that are not the standard security configurations that will make the system more secure. So that's one thing to look at. And also the kernel parameters. You can apply what's called an init container that will run on the node, or actually not an init container, a daemon set, which will run on all the nodes, and the daemon set can run systemctl calls, and they can tune the kernel parameters. So it's good to look into the different kernel parameters and what should be tuned depending on the needs of your application. So that's also a very important consideration, because just because it's applied in Ingress-Nginx doesn't mean that certain things are applied automatically to the kernel. And I can just show real quick. there's just a variety of so many different annotations for configuring cookie rules and CORS ages and all kinds of different things. So I would encourage you to kind of go ahead and look at the documentation for Ingress-Nginx, just to see what you can tune. And then even aside from that, you can using the server snippets and location snippets, you can tune pretty much anything that you can find within Nginx. So you can add your own custom directives, and it's highly configurable and highly tunable. So continue. Okay, and then what happens if things go wrong? How do I verify what's essentially going wrong? So to do that, what you can do is you can exec. So first of all, let's get pods-n, and so the Ingress. So I have the Ingress controller running on a private namespace that I have, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to exec. Okay, into this pod. Oh. So I'm going to go into the container, and what I'm going to do is now I can go into okay. So within the Nginx folder, you have nginx.conf, which is the file. So essentially, every time that you apply any Ingress rule, it just keeps appending different rules and different directives to the nginx.conf. So what you can do to troubleshoot is first see if the nginx.conf was actually updated, and go through it and see what rules exactly are running. So you can see that when I created meow.com, you can see the server name, you can see what port it's listening on, you can see what service it's pointing to, you can see what mod security configuration file it's running on, it's applying. You can pretty much see all the information that you need on that path and how it's being built. So that's a good way of seeing, hey, are my annotations being applied correctly, what's going on, and taking a look at that. So that would essentially, so if I were to make another one called wolf.com, then it would add another server directive with everything in it. So, and then you can go ahead and go through all these different directives, and you can kind of search through Nginx what they're for and what exactly they're doing, and make sure that everything's been applied right. So that's one way of looking. And then at the same time, you can actually also do kubectl logs, and then you can see all the logs that are going out. So usually you probably grep out things that are relevant, and you can see what's going on, and every single request is logged, every single error involving secrets and different different components were logged. So for example, the first time where we had the error where the basic auth wasn't working and it gave me a 503, if I would have looked at the logs right after that, you can see that the reason that the 503 had occurred was because it had issues reading the secret, so it didn't actually apply the service. So it didn't actually apply the Ingress rule because the secret didn't exist, so it didn't have anything to actually generate the basic authentication. And then verify that your deployments are running, verify that your backends are actually running, so you can actually SSH into the Ingress controller. So you can do kubectl get svc, and then you can see that the cluster IP is this, and then what I can do is I can exec into the Ingress controller, and then I can see if, I don't know if curl's installed, but I can see if it's actually reaching it via my cluster IP. So then you can see that, hey, so Ingress-Nginx is actually able to communicate with my application there must be something else wrong why I can't communicate through the outside. So then you check your actual load balancer, and you check the nodes and check the health of the nodes and different things. There's also a thing called crew, and crew gives you a bunch of debug tools. So it's pretty much a package manager for Kubernetes. And there's a lot of debug tools that you can run that essentially perform the commands a lot quicker. So you can install the Ingress-Nginx crew plugin, and then all you would do is run Ingress-Nginx, lint, and it'll go through all your deployments, all your services, everything, and it will go ahead and give you statistics of the health of all those items. And then last thing would be, so I've secured my Ingress. I know everything about Ingress and all that. What do I do? One thing you would want to do is probably go ahead and secure your application, ahead of time before actually deploying. So one thing I would recommend is Ingress is not going to be your only secure point. Your actual application should be secured beforehand. So there's a lot of different tools that you can do to do that. You can do some static, testing of your application, check the static code. You can see if you have any exposed secrets or anything that's been outdated or insecure, and make sure you always scan your container images. There's a lot of container images out there that are prone to Bitcoin mining and different things. I've heard a lot of that. So yeah. With that, just any questions anyone has, and I have some stickers and stuff, so I'll go ahead and pass those out. But yeah, pretty much. Thank you.